BEPS is larger than transfer pricing, but transfer pricing is at the core of it. And transfer pricing is probably what's driven so many of the countries in the G20 to get excited about the issues of international tax, because I think there's a perception that transfer pricing perhaps is really the core of where the problem is from the tax authority perspective. So BEPS is about more than transfer pricing, but transfer pricing is at the core of BEPS. And in the core of the BEPS transfer pricing issues is intangibles. Intangibles are hard to value. They're extremely central to what many businesses are, where they make their money today. And they're also portable. People can have a transfer pricing movement of intangibles, often to lower tax jurisdictions. And this is really what's creating so much of the tension in the system. Is this arm's length behavior? Is this in fact proper valuation? Billions of dollars can turn on these kinds of questions, and the BEPS project is focusing very much clearly on this area in particular. A couple of surprises that came out was documentation. Documentation is something that's been sort of fundamental to transfer pricing for many, many years. There hasn't been that much change in the area. I mean, we have more documentation requirements, but suddenly the BEPS plan is sort of upended all of that. And what happened was that there's two streams that came together. There's been a view among a lot of the NGOs, as well as some of the countries, that maybe there needs to be more transparency in where companies are paying tax. And so that there's been a movement out in the world of sort of the regulators in particular about country-by-country reporting. We sometimes call it C by C. So country-by-country reporting means where are you paying your tax, where do you have your income, and putting that all into one document. That document has not been seen as a transfer pricing document. It had been seen as a report on taxes that perhaps would be filed with your tax return, or perhaps something that would be required under SEC or other kinds of regulatory reporting. But what happened in the BEPS action plan was they said, you know, the place to do this isn't transfer pricing documentation. What we're going to do is have the companies, when they file their transfer pricing or create their transfer pricing documentation, they're going to have to paint a picture of where they earn their money, where they hold their intangibles, where they have their risk, and what their transfer pricing policies are. Not just for the transactions that are being covered. I mean, you may just have, you know, a simple contract manufacturer, and so therefore pretty much what we would think of as being a fairly simple, straightforward transaction. But now you're going to have to paint the picture of what's happening in your whole world of transfer pricing and the way in which you manage, you know, your business around your tax. Another area where I was surprised in reading through the BEPS action plan was management fees. There is a statement in there that an important area for study and perhaps change is to stop companies from paying management fees to their home offices. This is an area where I have not seen a base erosion as happening under management fees. I mean, yes, these can be controversial. Yes, these can be subject to challenge, and this is certainly an area where we see a lot of fights about this. But this is a report, this is a study, this is an effort for base erosion. The idea that companies are trying to shift income, you know, out of higher tax jurisdictions into lower tax jurisdictions. People don't put their headquarters in low tax jurisdictions. They're basically generally in high tax jurisdictions. And generally what you're doing is you're pushing out costs. And we don't really see a lot of huge markups. I mean, people are usually trying to keep the markups as low as possible. This is just what we think of sort of blocking and tackling in the simple area of transfer pricing, although it does get controversial. But what it doesn't get is into base shifting. Base shifting, you know, this is an issue I would agree with the governments when they're talking about intangibles, when they're talking about risk shifting, when we're talking about certain kinds of reinsurance transactions. I mean, there are things to be worried about, but I would certainly think that that whole area of tax planning is really not an overlap with service fees. I think we're going to see some fairly specific action points. I mean, I think we're going to see recommendations, draft legislation in the transfer pricing area. I think in some of the other areas we may see more studies. For example, the whole issue of how to address the digital economy. I think that's something that is a study, and I'm not anticipating that we're going to see direct action points. This is what legislation should look like. In the transfer pricing area, I think we are going to see that. We've already seen some fairly specific statements in the white papers that have been issued on documentation and on intangibles that the OECD had previously been working on. And so it was fairly straightforward for them to quickly bring that into the BEPS framework and move quickly to meet their deadlines. So I think that the transfer pricing is actually going to be fairly prescriptive, and we're going to see strong recommendations from the OECD for countries to amend their regulations, amend their laws and their approach to transfer pricing to be consistent with the ways in which the project develops their policy statements.